Burkina Faso has just buried 100 tons of bananas in the desert. Yes, bananas, not gold, not weapons, not fuel, but fruit. In a region where hunger and drought have long been a shadow over the lives of the people, why would a country destroy such a valuable resource when so many families are struggling to feed themselves? On the surface, this may seem like an absurd decision, a shocking waste of food in a place where food scarcity is a constant threat. But behind this shocking action lies something far more significant, a bold and revolutionary idea that could change the way Africa looks at agriculture, independence, and survival. The Sahel region of Africa, where Burkina Faso is located, is no stranger to harsh conditions. The land is dry, cracked, and increasingly inhospitable to farming. Over the years, the soil has become infertile due to overuse, drought, and the constant reliance on chemical fertilizers that do more harm than good in the long run. For the people of Burkina Faso, the struggle to grow enough food to feed their families has been a battle they've faced for decades. Yet, in the face of this challenge, the government made the controversial decision to bury 100 tons of bananas in the desert, seemingly for no reason other than to get rid of them. At first glance, this decision might seem like madness, a strange and incomprehensible act. Why would you bury food in the ground when so many people are in desperate need of it? The answer, however, goes beyond the simple act of waste. This is not just about food. It's about the future of agriculture in Burkina Faso and in Africa as a whole. The burial of the bananas is part of a bold new agricultural project known as Project Green Pulse, which seeks to use organic materials, like bananas, to restore the fertility of the land without relying on expensive and harmful chemical fertilizers. The bananas, though seemingly a perishable commodity, are rich in essential nutrients like potassium, phosphorus, and magnesium, elements that the Sahel soil is desperately lacking. The decomposition of these bananas in the desert will, in theory, revitalize the soil, making it possible for crops to grow where once there was only dust. This project could be the key to a new way of farming in Africa, one that is sustainable, self-reliant, and free from the dependency on foreign aid and fertilizers that have kept African nations at the mercy of international corporations. Why bananas? Why bury them in the desert? And how can something that seems so foolish on the surface have the potential to change the fate of an entire continent? These are the questions that lie at the heart of this groundbreaking project. Stick with me as we explore the deeper story behind Project Green Pulse and discover how a simple banana might just hold the key to a revolution in African agriculture and sovereignty. In early 2025, President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso launched Project Green Pulse, an ambitious initiative aimed at restoring the country's degraded soils using an unexpected resource: bananas. The government collected 100 tons of bananas, ranging from ripe to overripe and spoiled, and began burying them in the dry desert of the Sahel. This bold decision quickly gained attention both within the country and internationally. To many, the idea of burying perfectly good food seemed absurd, especially in a nation where hunger and food insecurity are pressing issues. At the heart of this initiative is the government's desire to break free from foreign dependency. For years, Burkina Faso, like many other African countries, has relied heavily on imported chemical fertilizers to restore its soil, spending millions of dollars each year on products that come with conditions and debts. However, the decision to bury bananas sent a clear message that the country could rely on its own resources, resources it already had in abundance, to address its agricultural challenges. Bananas are not just food. They are rich in essential nutrients that the soil in Burkina Faso's Sahel region desperately needs. Potassium, magnesium, and phosphorus are all critical elements for healthy soil. Yet after years of drought and overuse, the land has become depleted of these nutrients. Chemical fertilizers, while providing temporary relief, have harmed the soil in the long run. Bananas, when they decompose, release these nutrients back into the soil, helping to restore its fertility. The banana peel, rich in phosphorus, aids seed germination, and the decomposing fruit provides organic material that nourishes the soil, creating an environment in which microorganisms can thrive. The burial of the bananas was not only a scientific experiment, but also a symbolic act. In a region where survival has often meant depending on international aid and imports, this project represented a shift in mindset. It demonstrated that local resources could be used to solve local problems. The people and government of Burkina Faso no longer needed to rely on foreign assistance. They could use their own resources to restore the land and build a more sustainable future. At first, many people questioned the decision. Farmers and traders expressed disbelief, asking, "Why bury food when so many people are hungry?" There were protests, with some accusing the government of wasting valuable resources that could have been used to feed the population. However, others, especially in rural areas, began to see the logic behind the plan. For years, they had struggled with poor harvests, relying on expensive and often ineffective fertilizers. This new approach, using organic waste, provided hope for a more sustainable solution to the region's agricultural challenges. The project was not without risks. The soil in the Sahel had been difficult to restore, and many doubted that bananas, even with their rich nutrients, could reverse years of degradation. But there was also a sense of hope. This experiment could offer a new solution to a problem that had plagued the region for decades. Despite the skepticism, President Traoré's government moved forward with the burial of the bananas, not just as a scientific experiment, but as a statement of defiance. This was a challenge to the status quo, to the decades of reliance on foreign aid, to the multinational corporations that controlled the supply of fertilizers, and to the notion that Africa could not solve its own problems. Project Green Pulse was more than just an agricultural project. It was a declaration of sovereignty and self-reliance. The immediate result was not just scientific. It was about the people. In villages across Burkina Faso, people from all walks of life came together to bury the bananas. Children, teachers, farmers, and even soldiers worked together, carrying crates of bananas to the desert and planting them in the ground. It was an act of unity, a collective effort to restore not only the soil, but also the people's ownership over their future. Despite the initial protests, the atmosphere on the ground was filled with energy and excitement. It was a moment of transformation, a moment when the people realized that they could be part of the change they wanted to see. The government promised results, and within days, the first signs of success began to appear. Fields that had once been barren started to show signs of life. For the first time in a long time, the people of Burkina Faso were seeing hope for a future where they no longer had to rely on foreign aid to survive. The burial of the bananas was not just about solving an agricultural problem. It was about challenging the narrative that Africa could not take care of itself, that it would always be dependent on the outside world. In the end, the true impact of Project Green Pulse may not be in the physical transformation of the soil, but in the cultural and mental shift it inspired. The people of Burkina Faso saw that they could make a difference, that their land and resources could be used to create a better future for themselves and future generations. The burial of 100 tons of bananas in the Sahel desert marked a significant turning point for Burkina Faso. It was not just about burying fruit, but about initiating a groundbreaking experiment that would ultimately symbolize a shift in how the country dealt with its agricultural crises. President Ibrahim Traoré's government launched Project Green Pulse as a bold and innovative response to the country's ongoing challenges with soil degradation, food insecurity, and dependency on imported fertilizers. What began as a controversial idea quickly transformed into a movement that would change the future of agriculture in Burkina Faso and possibly across the African continent. The project's main goal was to tackle the severe degradation of the Sahel soil, which had been caused by years of drought and overuse. For decades, Burkina Faso had relied on imported chemical fertilizers to restore its soil. But these fertilizers were expensive, ineffective in the long run, and contributed to environmental damage. The soil's fertility had significantly declined, leaving many areas incapable of sustaining crops. This dependency on foreign products was not just financially draining, but also unsustainable in the long term. In response to this challenge, Project Green Pulse proposed a solution that was as simple as it was innovative: bury bananas in the desert. Bananas, rich in nutrients like potassium, magnesium, and phosphorus, could decompose in the soil and release these elements, restoring fertility to the land. By using organic material, such as bananas, the government hoped to create a more sustainable solution to soil restoration, moving away from harmful and costly chemical fertilizers. Bananas, which were otherwise wasted due to overproduction or spoilage, were seen as a valuable resource that could help rebuild the land. The decision to bury bananas, however, was met with skepticism from many in the local population and beyond. Many questioned why bananas, which could feed people in a country struggling with hunger, were being buried in the desert. It seemed wasteful to them, especially in a region where food insecurity was a pressing issue. Farmers and local traders were particularly confused by the idea. They had lived through years of poor harvests and could not understand how burying fruit could possibly help their crops grow. Despite the skepticism, the government remained firm in its belief that this unconventional method could work. It emphasized that Project Green Pulse was not just about soil restoration, but about creating an opportunity for the country to free itself from external dependency. The burial of bananas was symbolic of Burkina Faso's commitment to self-sufficiency and sovereignty. It was an opportunity to show the world that Africa could solve its own problems with its own resources. In the early stages of the project, the government and its supporters worked tirelessly to convince the public of the potential benefits of the banana burial. Villagers from various regions of the country were called to join in the effort, and soon a large-scale communal initiative took shape. Children, teachers, farmers, and even soldiers participated in the burial of bananas, working together to create a better future for their land. This collective effort was an important aspect of the project, as it helped unite the people around a common goal. It wasn't just an agricultural experiment. It was a movement that brought people together to restore not only their soil, but also their sense of ownership over their future. Within weeks, test plots where bananas had been buried started showing signs of improvement. The once barren and infertile land began to show early signs of life, with crops like millet and sorghum beginning to sprout. The decomposing bananas had released nutrients back into the soil, helping to restore its fertility and create the conditions needed for plants to grow. These early successes were incredibly encouraging, especially for the farmers who had long struggled with poor harvests. The results were tangible, and they provided hope that this alternative method of soil restoration could be the solution that Burkina Faso had been waiting for. Despite the initial successes, the project faced continued challenges. The soil in the Sahel had been degraded for decades, and questions about the long-term viability of the banana burial method remained. Could the land continue to regenerate without further interventions? Would the rains be enough to support the crops in the future? And perhaps most importantly, could this method be scaled up to cover larger areas of land? These were questions that the government and the people of Burkina Faso had to grapple with as the project moved forward. In the face of these challenges, the success of Project Green Pulse began to attract attention beyond Burkina Faso. Other countries in the Sahel and across Africa began to take notice of the results. Nations facing similar challenges with soil degradation and food insecurity saw the potential of using organic waste, like bananas, to restore their soil without relying on expensive and harmful fertilizers. The project sparked conversations about how local resources could be used to address Africa's agricultural challenges, reducing the continent's dependence on external aid and foreign imports. Internationally, the project drew mixed reactions. While some critics in the West dismissed the idea as a temporary solution, others began to recognize its potential. Burkina Faso's efforts were seen as a model for other African countries that sought to reclaim control over their agricultural futures. By focusing on local resources, the country was showing that sustainable agriculture could be achieved without relying on external sources of aid. The success of Project Green Pulse ultimately highlighted the importance of innovation and local knowledge in solving Africa's agricultural challenges. It demonstrated that African countries, including Burkina Faso, could find solutions to their own problems by using the resources available to them. By burying bananas in the desert, Burkina Faso not only restored its soil, but also reclaimed its agricultural sovereignty. The project became a powerful symbol of hope for a continent in need of sustainable solutions to its agricultural problems. Project Green Pulse not only started as an agricultural experiment, but also evolved into a powerful movement for change in Burkina Faso and across Africa. The idea of burying bananas to restore the fertility of the land quickly became a focal point for a broader debate about Africa's agricultural future, independence, and its reliance on foreign aid. While the project was still in its early stages, the results already had far-reaching consequences for Burkina Faso's agricultural landscape and beyond. As the government continued to bury bananas in the desert, the immediate effects began to show. In the test plots where bananas were buried, green shoots of millet, sorghum, and other crops began to emerge. This was an encouraging sign that the soil, once considered barren, was regaining its fertility. The decomposition of the bananas released vital nutrients into the soil, which were essential for the growth of plants. The success of the project gave farmers hope that they could rely on local resources to restore their soil instead of turning to expensive chemical fertilizers or foreign aid. Farmers who had long struggled with poor harvests were particularly optimistic about the results. For many years, they had relied on imported fertilizers, which were costly and often ineffective. The idea of using bananas, which were abundant and often wasted, to restore the soil seemed both practical and sustainable. As the early signs of success began to emerge, Farmers in Burkina Faso began to experiment with the method on their own land, planting bananas and other organic materials to improve their soil. Despite the initial positive results, the project was not without its challenges. The Sahel region had suffered from decades of drought and desertification, and restoring the soil was never going to be an easy task. While the banana burial method appeared effective in small test areas, many questioned whether it could be scaled up to cover larger areas. Critics in the international community also remained skeptical. They pointed out that using bananas as a fertilizer might not be enough to tackle the broader agricultural challenges facing the region. One of the most significant challenges was the uncertainty surrounding the long-term effects of the project. Would the soil remain fertile after the bananas decomposed, or would it revert to its previous barren state? Could the method be adapted to other regions of Africa facing similar challenges? These questions were central to the project's future. However, the early successes were enough to inspire hope and to fuel the belief that Project Green Pulse could be part of a much larger solution to Africa's agricultural problems. The project's significance went beyond its immediate impact on soil fertility. It became a symbol of self-reliance and sovereignty for Burkina Faso and, by extension, for Africa. For too long, African countries had been dependent on foreign aid and external solutions to their agricultural problems. The use of bananas to restore the soil was a powerful statement that Africa could find its own solutions to its challenges. By using local resources and innovative thinking, Burkina Faso demonstrated that it was capable of solving its own problems without relying on outside help. The burial of bananas was also a challenge to the prevailing narrative that Africa could not manage its own agricultural systems. For decades, African nations had been portrayed as unable to feed their populations without international assistance. Project Green Pulse challenged this narrative by showing that Africa could innovate and adapt to its unique challenges. The success of the project was a reminder that, despite the continent's struggles, there was immense potential for growth and transformation if African nations took charge of their own futures. The project also had a broader political impact. Burkina Faso's decision to rely on its own resources to restore its soil sent a clear message to foreign governments and multinational corporations that the country was no longer willing to accept the terms of external aid. For years, Burkina Faso had been caught in a cycle of dependency, relying on fertilizer imports and foreign assistance to maintain its agricultural systems. Project Green Pulse signaled that the country was ready to break free from this cycle and forge its own path. International reaction to the project was mixed. While some critics in the West dismissed the initiative as a gimmick or a temporary solution, others began to recognize its potential. Some African countries, particularly those in the Sahel, began to see the project as a model for addressing their own agricultural challenges. The idea of using organic waste, like bananas, to restore soil fertility was a novel approach that could be adapted to other regions facing similar issues of desertification and soil degradation. Despite the skepticism, Burkina Faso's success with Project Green Pulse had a profound impact on the global conversation about agricultural sustainability. The project highlighted the importance of using local resources to address local problems. It also underscored the need for African countries to reclaim control over their agricultural systems and find solutions that were not reliant on external aid or multinational corporations. The success of Project Green Pulse also sparked conversations about the potential for similar initiatives across Africa. If Burkina Faso could restore its soil using bananas, Could other countries replicate this model? Countries facing similar environmental challenges, such as Niger, Mali, and Chad, began to explore the idea of using organic materials to rejuvenate their soils. The project inspired a shift in how African nations approached agriculture and sustainability. It became clear that local solutions, based on indigenous knowledge and resources, could play a key role in addressing Africa's agricultural challenges. As the project continued to gain momentum, it was clear that the effects would reach far beyond Burkina Faso. The burial of bananas in the desert, which initially seemed like a simple experiment, had become a symbol of Africa's potential to take charge of its own agricultural destiny. It was a powerful reminder that African nations had the capacity to find innovative solutions to their problems, using the resources available to them. The success of Project Green Pulse also raised important questions about the future of agriculture in Africa. Could organic farming and the use of local resources become the foundation for a new agricultural model in Africa? Would other African nations follow Burkina Faso's example and begin to rely more on local solutions? The answers to these questions were not clear, but one thing was certain. Project Green Pulse had opened the door to a new way of thinking about agriculture in Africa, one that emphasized sustainability, self-reliance, and innovation. Project Green Pulse, an ambitious initiative launched by President Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso, has garnered significant attention both domestically and internationally. The project, which began with the burial of 100 tons of bananas in the desert, quickly became more than just an agricultural experiment. It evolved into a symbol of Burkina Faso's determination to break free from external dependency, reclaim control over its agricultural future, and demonstrate that Africa could find its own solutions to its challenges. In the beginning, many were skeptical about the burial of bananas. To most, it seemed like an absurd waste of food, especially in a country that had long struggled with hunger and food insecurity. Critics, including some farmers and traders, questioned why bananas, which could have been used to feed people, were being buried in the desert. For many, this act seemed like a misguided response to a pressing problem. But the government of Burkina Faso, driven by the need to solve the country's soil degradation crisis, was not simply discarding food. It was part of a larger, innovative plan to restore soil fertility using locally available resources. The project was a direct response to the country's reliance on expensive, imported chemical fertilizers, which had been used for decades to try to restore the fertility of the soil. While fertilizers provided short-term solutions, they were harmful in the long run, and the country remained dependent on foreign products. Project Green Pulse sought to use local organic materials like bananas to restore the soil's natural fertility. Bananas, rich in nutrients like potassium, phosphorus, and magnesium, provided an organic alternative that was both cost-effective and sustainable. As the bananas decomposed, they would release these nutrients into the soil, improving its quality and making it more fertile for future crops. Despite initial skepticism, the results of the project began to show promise. In the test plots where bananas were buried, crops like millet and sorghum began to sprout. The soil, once barren and infertile, was showing signs of rejuvenation. This early success gave farmers hope that they could finally rely on a sustainable, locally sourced solution to their agricultural problems. The project had the potential to reduce the country's dependence on expensive chemical fertilizers and, more importantly, on foreign aid. By using local resources, Burkina Faso was not only improving its agricultural systems, but also asserting its sovereignty and independence. Project Green Pulse's success also had a broader political and cultural impact. The project represented a significant shift in the way Burkina Faso viewed its relationship with agriculture and foreign aid. For years, the country had been trapped in a cycle of reliance on imported fertilizers and foreign assistance to address its agricultural challenges. The burial of bananas symbolized Burkina Faso's commitment to finding homegrown solutions to its problems. It was a powerful statement that the country could solve its agricultural challenges without relying on external help. The project's success also inspired neighboring countries facing similar challenges. Countries in the Sahel region, such as Mali, Niger, and Chad, began to take notice of the potential of using organic materials like bananas to restore soil fertility. The project's results raised questions about how other African countries could replicate this model and reduce their dependence on imported fertilizers. It sparked a larger conversation about agricultural sustainability and the need for Africa to harness its local resources to solve its problems. Internationally, the response to Project Green Pulse has been mixed. Many Western countries and international organizations initially dismissed the project as a short-term solution to a much larger problem. Critics argued that the burial of bananas could not address the broader issues of soil degradation and food insecurity in Africa. They believed that the project's impact would be limited and that it could not replace the need for modern agricultural techniques and chemical fertilizers. However, as the results began to show, some international observers began to acknowledge the potential of the project. Countries like China and Russia, which have historically supported African nations in their pursuit of sovereignty, saw Project Green Pulse as an example of innovation and independence. In the United States and Europe, the project's early success sparked cautious optimism. Some experts began to recognize the value of using organic resources to restore soil fertility, particularly in regions like the Sahel, where drought and desertification are constant threats. There was growing recognition that African countries could benefit from adopting local solutions to their agricultural problems, rather than relying on foreign aid or imported fertilizers. While skepticism still existed, the project helped shift the conversation about Africa's agricultural future. It highlighted the importance of self-reliance and sustainability in the face of mounting challenges. Despite the growing international interest, Project Green Pulse still faces challenges. The long-term sustainability of the project remains uncertain. Can the benefits of burying bananas be sustained over time? Will the soil continue to improve after the bananas have decomposed? Can the project be scaled to address the needs of larger areas in Burkina Faso and other countries in the Sahel? These are questions that need to be answered as the project continues to grow. However, the early successes have shown that it is possible to restore soil fertility without relying on expensive chemical fertilizers or foreign aid. The project has already begun to change the way people in Burkina Faso and across Africa view their agricultural systems and their potential for self-sufficiency. Project Green Pulse has sparked a larger movement towards sustainable agriculture in Africa. It has inspired African countries to think differently about their agricultural challenges and consider the potential of organic solutions. By using local resources like bananas, Burkina Faso has shown that it is possible to create a more sustainable, self-reliant agricultural system. As the project progresses, it has the potential to transform not only Burkina Faso's agricultural future, but also the future of agriculture across the continent. Project Green Pulse in Burkina Faso has not only been a turning point for the country's agricultural sector, but also a significant symbol of the country's determination to take control of its own future. While the results of the banana burial project are still unfolding, the immediate impact has been nothing short of transformative, not just for the soil, but for the mindset of the people and their relationship to their land. The success of the project so far has sparked optimism and a renewed sense of ownership among the people of Burkina Faso. For decades, they had been trapped in a cycle of dependence on foreign aid and chemical fertilizers. The government's bold decision to bury bananas in the desert challenged the narrative that Africa cannot solve its own problems. The project's early success in restoring the fertility of the land demonstrated that local resources could be used to tackle some of the continent's most pressing challenges. More importantly, it showed that self-reliance and innovation were key to securing the future of agriculture in Burkina Faso. However, while the project has inspired hope and pride within the country, it has also raised questions about its long-term viability. Will the benefits of burying bananas last, or will the soil eventually return to its degraded state? Can this model be scaled up to address the broader agricultural needs of Burkina Faso and the rest of Africa? These questions are crucial in determining the project's long-term success and its potential for replication in other countries facing similar challenges. Internationally, Project Green Pulse has garnered both praise and skepticism. Some foreign governments and organizations have lauded the project as a breakthrough in sustainable agriculture, while others have dismissed it as a short-term solution to a much larger problem. Regardless of the external opinions, one thing is clear: the project has sparked a wider conversation about Africa's agricultural future. Countries across the continent, particularly in the Sahel region, have taken note of the potential of using organic resources to restore soil fertility and reduce dependency on expensive fertilizers and foreign aid. The success of Project Green Pulse has demonstrated that with the right leadership, innovation, and determination, Africa can forge its own path toward agricultural sustainability. By utilizing local resources like bananas, Burkina Faso has proven that solutions to the continent's challenges lie not just in external assistance, but in harnessing the power of local knowledge and resources. The burial of bananas may seem like a simple act, but it carries with it the weight of a much larger movement toward sovereignty, self-reliance, and the future of Africa's agriculture.